Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Cowherd. Today I will be presenting a collaborative project called Growing the Tribal Forestry Workforce. This is a project that is in partnership with the Intertribal Timber Council, Affiliated Tribes and Northwest Indians Economic Development Corporation, United South and Eastern Tribes, and Heritage University on the Yakama Nation, as well as EcoTrust. I will be covering 4 major topic areas today in this presentation. The first, I will provide an overview of our project. The second, we'll cover survey methods and findings. The third, I'll be sharing a little bit about supporting a really special mentorship program that we've been supporting for this past year. And finally, we'll end with next steps. So for our project overview, this project was funded by the U.S. Forest Service's National Urban and Community Forestry Challenge Cost Share Grant Program. Our steering committee is made up of representatives from our project partners, which include the Intertribal Timber Council, Affiliated Tribes and Northwest Indians Economic Development Corporation, United South and Eastern Tribes, Heritage University on the Yakama Nation, and EcoTrust. Our project seeks to address the gap in tribal forestry workforce that was identified through the IFMAT report, as well as implementing the communication and collaboration strategic pillars of ITC's strategic workforce plan for the years 2018 to 2022. Our project is unique in that it is cross-collaborative across fields. Our project brings together partners from tribal organizations, now nonprofits, education institutions, and economic development corporations as well. So we're trying to approach this gap from a holistic perspective, as well as an interdisciplinary perspective too. Our project has 4 phases. The first phase is the gap and opportunity assessment, also known as the survey. The second phase are key stakeholder interviews. The third phase is an intergenerational mentorship program, which is also called Next Gen. And the fourth phase is case studies. So in today's presentation, I'll be focusing mostly on phase 1 and phase 3. However, I will mention phase 2 and 4. So our project began in 2018 in the fall. The steering committee was formed and we began planning and developing our gap and opportunity assessment, also known as the survey. Throughout 2019, the survey was open and we conducted a lot of outreach to encourage tribes to participate and respond in this survey. And then in Q1 of 2020, we began to analyze the survey results and started an initial interview process. However, due to the pandemic and then subsequently a very severe wildfire season, we put that process on hold. So phase 2 is currently picking up again and in progress. However, we have not yet completed phase 2. Phase 3, which was the mentorship program, is in progress. During Q1 of 2020, when we had to put the interview process on hold, we also had to begin pivoting our planned in-person mentorship program to meet distance learning requirements. We were able to do so successfully with the help of a lot of different collaborators and educators and tribal staff members. And we were able to pilot the Next Gen mentorship program with the Yakama Nation tribal high school students and Heritage University in Q2 of 2020. Also, what happened in 2020 is we secured additional funding to expand this program for the 2020-2021 academic year. So this is with a new cohort of high school students, and instead of just a short 8-week program, which is what the pilot was, we're able to extend it for the entire academic year. During Q4 of 2020, we also held an Indigenous Science and Forest Educator Workshop Series. This is a collaborative of Native educators that organically grew out of the Next Gen program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in our presentation. But first, I want us to focus on our survey results and some of the analysis that we completed in Q1 of 2021. So our survey methods and findings. So how we developed the survey is we first started with a literature review. So we wanted to see what existing materials were out there. Those materials that greatly informed our survey framework, as well as the questions, were the IFMAT report, the National Congress of American Indians Tribal Workforce Development, a decision framing toolkit, ITC strategic plan, and also the Tribal Rangeland Management Workforce Development Survey. All of the framework as well as the questions were collaborated on and approved by the steering committee project members, and in some cases their networks also had the opportunity to provide feedback on the questions that we asked. For our survey outreach, we used SurveyMonkey and for our survey to collect our responses. But our outreach, we did a lot of in-person presentations as well as booths at our different project partner events and networks. So the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Semi-Annual Conventions, United South and Eastern Tribes Semi-Annual Convention, ITC's Annual Symposium. All of these events you may have seen myself or a project team member talking to you about this project. We also shared out about the survey opportunity on our social media networks and email as well. The response period, as mentioned earlier, was for 1 year, so from January 2019 to January 2020. Initial findings were shared with the steering committee members and were presented at the 2020 AT&I Winter Convention and ITC's Fall 2020 board meetings to select committees. Our survey response rate was over 20 tribes participated in the survey. Most of the survey participants were from Washington and Oregon. And so those 20 tribes that did participate in the survey, I know that seems small, but it actually captures about 95% of the timber volume that's produced by tribes. So we're really proud of this effort and we're happy with the results. And we just want to thank everybody for their contributions. Here on the slide, you're also seeing an image of the geographic distribution of survey responses. As you can see, a lot of those pins are up in the Pacific Northwest. And then we even have some pins in Alaska, as well as Midwest and on the East. So while we were analyzing our survey results, new demographic data also came to light through the National Indian Education Association's reports. So 142,000 K through 12 American Indian students live on reservation, but 502,000 K through 12 American Indian students live off reservation. So of that, that means 78% of K through 12 American Indian students currently live off reservation. So why is that important? What that means is that there's a lot of different opportunities for us to outreach and increase awareness of forestry education programs and forestry career pathways to off-reservations students. Okay. So now I'm going to go through and highlight a series of 5 key survey questions that were asked of our survey participants. For number 5, I want to share out that this was given as a matrix. We asked the survey participants to please indicate the tribe's experience with and or interest in the following tribal forestry areas. And so those survey question 5 areas that will be covered on the subsequent slides are education, community events, youth camps, training programs, and recruitment and outreach to build the workforce. So for survey question 5, for education, 12 tribes responded, or 12 participants responded that their tribe had implemented an education program. 8 are in progress 6 were not interested. For a training program, 8 survey respondents had replied that their tribe had implemented a training program. 3 were in progress. 13, however, were interested in the training programs. For recruitment and outreach, 8 had implemented some form of recruitment and outreach. 7 were in the progress of implementing a recruitment and outreach, and 10 were interested in learning more about recruitment and outreach strategies. We also focused on youth camps. So of the survey participants, 13 responded that that their tribe had implemented a youth camp related to tribal forestry. 4 has a youth camp in progress, and 8 are interested in youth camps, with 1 respondent not being interested. So this is a separate survey question. So survey question 6 asked if there were any forestry education or other learning opportunities offered for the tribal community. 15 responded yes, 2 responded no, and 6 were not aware. Survey question 9 asked if the tribe had an active student internship or similar program in forestry or natural resources. 17 participants actually did not respond to this question, so they did not have an answer. However, 13 responded yes, they do have a student internship or similar program in forestry or natural resources, and 7 responded no, we don't have a program, however, we're interested. So from these survey findings, what we will be doing is creating interview questions. So some potential interview questions that were generated based on these survey results would be to follow up with questions around capacity and resources needed, collaboration between tribal departments or other organizations and tribes. You know, what were some of the successes? What were some of the challenges that you experienced in developing these programs? What topics are covered in the education program, the training programs, the youth camps, and then the student internships too. And then in terms of recruitment and outreach, we also want to know, do some areas need more support than others? Is there a higher need to recruit for a specific area in tribal forestry over another area? So these key stakeholder interviews in phase 2, what that will be doing is helping us flesh out the picture of what these different programs and initiatives look like and what resources are needed for tribes who are interested in these types of programs to implement them. So now we'll be talking a little bit, we're going to be shifting gears a little bit and talking about the mentorship program. So the Next Gen Mentorship Program, it builds on an existing program framework called Environmentors. So the reason why that we were building off of this framework is that it had already had success with a sister school called White Swan. And so we adapted the program for Yakama Nation tribal school students. The Environmentors program is a nationwide program under the National Council for Science and the Environment, and it provides students with hands-on research and experience in support of a caring mentor outside of school. So how this mentorship program worked is that Native Heritage University students were paired with Native Yakama Nation tribal school students, and these students were high school aged. We had adapted the program for distance learning, and we used Zoom to provide 2 classes each week, which focused on forestry topics and different activities. Mentors would meet with Heritage University faculty and EcoTrust staff, myself, outside of the class period to prepare for the students' classes. So our lesson plans and activities were based off of what we could do using these digital tools. So we relied a lot on Google Suite, such as like Google Drive, Google Maps, Google Slides. We used YouTube a lot, NRCS's web soil surveys, Zoom breakout rooms, so the mentors could meet one-on-one with students privately. And our lesson plans were centered around forestry related topics. So ecological communities, tree and plant identification, elevation and topography, soils, and wildlife habitat. So here's some of the examples of the different activities, or what the activities looked like in a digital environment. You're probably wondering, like, how did they do soil sampling? So for instance, we had Yakama Nation Natural Resource staff go out into the field and take photos for us of plant species. So over there on the left, you'll see a willow species that was found in the Kweyama urban forest. And actually, the high school students named that forest Kweyama. With additional funding that came in the fall of 2020, we were able to expand from just the urban forests on their high school grounds out to some of the Yakama Nation's closed area that is not pictured here. But on the right, what you'll see is a Google Map satellite image of a forest with downed trees with a creek nearby. So we use Google Maps satellite images to explore the terrain and get an aerial view of what these trees look like from way up in the sky. And lots of students really enjoyed Google Maps and enjoyed this exploring the satellite images. We're really proud of some of the responses that we got back from the students after completing the program. You know, this last year, as many of you know, it was really difficult for both parents, teachers, students, healthcare workers, everyone. And I felt really honored to give students the space for them to interact one-on-one with the community digitally. And one of the students had mentioned that it felt like home, the class did, and that it made him feel happy and joyful, and that he wanted to be like the instructors, happy and outgoing. So I'm really proud to have offered that light for them during this past year. Out of the mentorship program and in the development of the distance learning materials, we collaborated with a variety of different organizations and also instructors. And so that culminated in a workshop, which we had received funding for a total of 6 hours to allow Indigenous science and forest educators to meet and share with each other the different forestry curriculum materials we were using, as well as forestry related activities that we were using in a digital environment. We also worked through together adapting in-person forestry activities to what that would look like at home, given the distance learning state of things. Participants also discussed specific successes, challenges, and resources needed to make this distance learning effective. And we were able to document these needs and share them with the Forest Service. Finally, our next steps. So we plan on continuing our support for planning efforts for Heritage University's 2-week field experience program in August of 2021. This is obviously pending COVID-19 measures. We are also seeking to secure additional funding to continue the Next Gen program. We would like to work with additional tribes and support Indigenous science and forest educators. And we also want to continue our collaboration with project partner organizations and learn more about programs such as the Pacific Education Institute and 10 Gather Grow. As far as the project's phases go, the survey will be informing our project's key stakeholder interviews. These interviews will be conducted throughout the summer and fall. Our tribal forestry programs who responded to the survey tribal educators, higher education and technical programs, and both recent graduates and current students of tribal forestry college programs will be the types of participants we'll be outreaching to. Case studies, we also anticipate that they will be conducted over the summer pending COVID-19. And what the case studies will offer is a deeper dive into creative approaches that tribal forestry programs are using to address workforce development challenges. And we will be documenting these case studies in a final report, which will be made available at the end of this year. And again, this is all pending that our social distancing measures are lifted and that we can perform these activities safely. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, I will be here for the Q&A.
Thank you, Stephanie, for your presentation. Was there anything you wanted to add before we get started with questions and answers from our participants?
I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for listening to that presentation. I know that workforce development isn't going to be a quick fix, and so this is just one step forward, hopefully. And I am looking forward to answering your questions if you have any. If you don't, it's okay too.
Great. And it looks like you already have some folks reaching out for contact in the chat box. So if folks want to connect with Stephanie, feel free to use that in the chat box as well. But it looks like we have a question from Natalia. Are there plans to host another workshop for tribal forest educators?
I would love that. And that's something that I would like to continue. That workshop, what we were able to do with that funding is actually provide stipends to the participants. So as a former educator, like in a university setting myself, I know it's really important to pay teachers for their lesson planning and prep time. That's something I know that we're stretched pretty thin on. So we are able to provide stipends for the participants. I encourage you to reach out with me. I'd love to connect with you all, and if there's enough interest, definitely interested in reviving and maybe sustaining a learning community of Indigenous science and forest educators.
And Allison also had a question. Thanks for the interesting talk. How many students participated in the program? Do you have plans to track their outcomes?
We do. So for the pilot, we were not tracking the outcomes for the pilot, which was the 8-week program in spring of 2020. There were a total, we started with 6 students and we ended with 4 students, which actually is higher than the graduation rate at Yakama Nation Tribal School. And so we honestly, like, with COVID and everything, we were just excited to see these kids routinely, you know, twice a week. People were showing up. It was good to see what they, you know, we were checking in with them, you know, making sure that, you know, that they were okay too. It wasn't just about forestry. It was also about connecting and checking in on them. For this last year, 2020 to 2021, we had partnered with Washington. That's also somebody I forgot. I'm so sorry. So Stephanie Running-Hawk Johnson from Washington State University is a researcher, and she's Native as well. And she partnered with Heritage University and Yakama Nation Tribal School, and she will be evaluating the student outcomes. The students did a pre-class survey, and we're just finishing up this year, and they will be also completing a post-class survey. And this year was a little tricky. We started off with 12 students. It went down to about 8 that would show up, and now we have like a solid 4 again. So I'm kind of sensing 4 is a good number. You know, obviously we welcome more students, but 12 was even overwhelming a little bit for the mentors, you know, because we would like to give one-on-one time and partner mentors with each individual student so that they get to build that relationship throughout the year. Part of the reason why I think we lost so many students too is that, as many of you know, we were distance learning, and then it switched to this hybrid in-person format, and we just couldn't nail down the schedule for a time for all of us to meet together, because half the students, A through L, were going to class Monday, Tuesday, and then the other half of L through Z were going to class Thursday, Friday. So there wasn't a cohesive time that we could all meet. So the mentors met with the students outside of our normal class period.
And we have a question about whether you continue to the mentorship. Sorry. First of all, mentioned great program from Joey, and was wondering, do you plan to continue the mentorship virtually in the fall? And if so, have you thought about doing a research project together with iNaturalist?
Yeah, hi Joey. So actually that's something I didn't mention. Thank you for bringing that up. So the students actually conducted individual research projects on the urban forest. And then this, for the pilot program, in this last year, they were comparing the urban forest to the closed area. So there were wildlife cameras set up by Yakima Nation Natural Resources staff in the urban forest, as well as the closed area that produced, as like an aside, that produced some contentious topics because there was a lot of elk, and you could probably figure out where those elk were. So we made sure not to give away those locations to the students, and we had a private YouTube channel. And so the students would come up with investigative questions or come up with research questions, and they would work one-on-one with their mentors to develop a research process, their methods. They would test their hypothesis, and then right where we are right now in the classes, they are actually developing research posters, and also they'll be presenting out to their peers, which may just be me and the mentors, just because of timing. As far as iNaturalists go, Joey, I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. I know just as a first thing that's popping up for me is that tribal sovereignty over data, and being really careful about sharing out what cultural resources are where, what plants are where and how much, what's the abundance of that. So that's something that I would defer to the tribe before we engage in that sort of tool and sharing of data.
We have 2 more questions we have on time, and there's a few more coming in. So Stephanie, if you want to put your email address in the chat for folks to check in with you and follow up, because I know you did invite folks to reach out to you. Jim was wondering whether there's any outreach information being developed for off-reservation K through 12 students.
That's a really good question. So I'd say right now, I don't have like a specific communications or outreach plan for off-reservation students. We have worked with or in collaboration with Salem Kaiser Indian Education Program, as well as 10 Gather Grow, which is a teacher training program based in Olympia, Washington. And I believe Dawn Matanik just shared out their website. And so we're working with Elise Crone at 10 Gather Grow, or Grub, sorry, I should say Grub, at Good Grub to develop curriculum materials. Dawn's also been working with me too on that. And that's something that I think when we have a specific program, which we're hoping to expand and scale out this program and adapt it right into whatever form that different tribes or different indigenous education programs may need off reservation. That's something we're definitely interested in.
Great. We have 2 quick questions. We are close to time. One was whether there's a bar to young people participating who are involved in the juvenile justice system.
I would say I'm not certain about that. I mean, if we're talking about so all the students that are in Yakima, or that are in this program, are Yakima Nation tribal school students, and I'm not sure about what their requirements are. I think it would be really interesting, and I'm interested if you'd like whoever answered that or asked that question to talk a little bit more about what they envision a program would look like and who should we connect to.
Okay, and for folks, if you didn't notice, Stephanie did put her email address in the chat, so please follow up if you want. We'll take one last quick question from Zachary regarding Do you believe that having a deliverable, like producing maps or presenting, is important to the learning process?
I guess I have a clarifying question. I'll try to answer both because I know we're on time. I think maps are great. As far as like, the research poster, what this is doing is that it's the students are working towards something that they would be that they would need to do anyways in higher education if they were going on to a 2-year or a 4-year. And as far as a hard deliverable with maps, like printing out maps, yes, if we could have printed out and given kits to the students that had printed out maps and they could, draw on them, that would be great. We actually used Google Maps, and you can create your own map, and there's like tools where you can measure distance, you can add your own markers, you can label the different points, and you can add layers. So it's kind of similar to ArcGIS. We're not telling them it's ArcGIS, but it's like, it's really similar to some of the tools that that I would use if I'm, like taking inventory and mapping a forest. So I think it's great to expose them to that early on.